Why most European countries are saying, enough, to immigrants. Could the US be next? Across Europe, the message is growing louder: enough is enough. From Paris to Berlin, from Italy to the United Kingdom, more and more European countries are tightening their borders, rolling back immigration policies, and saying no to the growing wave of migrants. But could the United States be next? Is America about to follow Europe's footsteps, slamming the door on immigrants? What's really behind this sudden shift, and how could it reshape the world as we know it? Stick around, because the truth might shock you. Hey friends, welcome back to our channel, the place where we break down the most pressing global issues you need to know about. If you're new here, make sure to smash that like button and hit subscribe so you don't miss our deep dives into world-changing events. And if you've been with us for a while, thank you for your continued support. Now, let's dive into this growing crisis that's causing a political earthquake across Europe and could soon be knocking on America's door. For decades, Europe has been a beacon of hope for millions seeking a better life, but that dream is fading fast. Countries like Germany, Sweden, and Italy have long opened their arms to refugees and immigrants. But in recent years, something has changed. The rise of populist movements, economic pressures, cultural clashes, and rising crime rates have sparked a wave of anti-immigrant sentiment. Let's take a closer look at why this sudden pushback is happening now and what the implications are. Rising populism and nationalism. The fear of losing identity. Across Europe, the rise of populism and nationalism isn't just a political trend. It's a reaction to a growing fear that the very essence of national identity is being threatened. In countries like France, Italy, Hungary, and even Sweden, populist leaders are surging in popularity, pushing a narrative that's hard to ignore. Immigrants are diluting the cultural heritage and values that have defined these nations for centuries. For many Europeans, it's no longer about welcoming those in need but about defending what makes them European in the first place. The fear of losing their language, traditions, and way of life has sparked a wave of nationalism that's sweeping across the continent. Populist leaders like Marine Le Pen in France and Viktor Orban in Hungary have tapped into this deep-seated anxiety, claiming that the open-door policies of the past are destroying the social fabric of their nations. And for millions of voters, it's resonating. The question isn't just about immigration anymore, it's about survival. Survival of identity. Survival of tradition. In the eyes of many, immigration is no longer seen as a humanitarian effort but as an invasion. A cultural invasion that threatens to erase centuries of history in the blink of an eye. And this isn't just rhetoric. Across Europe, national symbols and cultural landmarks are increasingly seen as battlegrounds for this fight, with populist leaders standing firm as the self-declared protectors of their heritage. But is this fear justified? Or are these leaders playing on the emotions of a public already fractured by economic and social struggles? As this wave of nationalism grows, the line between patriotism and xenophobia becomes ever thinner, raising the uncomfortable question: how far will Europe go to protect its identity, and at what cost? Economic strain. Immigrants as a burden? When it comes to immigration, the economic debate is as fierce as ever. In many European countries, what once seemed like an act of compassion, welcoming refugees and migrants, has now turned into a growing concern about sustainability. For years, leaders in nations like Germany, Italy, and Greece championed the idea of open borders, promising that migrants would invigorate the workforce and boost the economy. But now, with unemployment rates still climbing in some regions, underfunded social services, and housing shortages becoming critical, many are asking, is immigration creating an economic burden too heavy to bear? In places like Italy and Greece, countries already grappling with their own financial crises, the arrival of large numbers of migrants is seen by many as straining an already fragile system. In the public eye, the narrative is shifting. Instead of being seen as potential contributors to society, immigrants are increasingly viewed as competitors for scarce jobs and welfare benefits. And the backlash is growing. For example, in Germany, which opened its doors to over 1 million refugees in 2015, the pressure on housing, healthcare, and education has become so intense that even local governments are calling for stricter controls. But here's the real question. Is this strain a consequence of immigration itself, or is it the result of economic mismanagement and inequality that existed long before? Critics argue that governments are scapegoating immigrants, deflecting blame for decades of underfunding and economic mismanagement. Yet, for many citizens struggling to make ends meet, the sight of social services being stretched thin while new arrivals receive assistance has only deepened resentment. As economic inequality widens across Europe, the debate about immigration is no longer just about borders, it's about who gets what and who gets left behind. The fear that immigrants are taking more than they're giving is becoming a rallying cry for those demanding tougher restrictions. And with populist leaders seizing on these concerns, immigration is increasingly framed not as a humanitarian obligation, but as a financial liability that could cripple national economies. So the question remains: is immigration really the root of Europe's economic strain, or is it being used as a convenient scapegoat for much deeper issues? Security concerns. Immigrants and crime rates. When it comes to immigration, few topics ignite as much fear and controversy as security concerns. Across Europe, a disturbing narrative has taken hold: the idea that rising immigration is directly linked to an increase in crime and terrorism. From high-profile terror attacks in France and Belgium to the sensationalized reports of migrant-related gang violence in Sweden and Germany, these incidents have fueled public anxiety, and populist leaders have seized the moment. For many Europeans, the fear isn't just about job competition or cultural integration, it's about personal safety. Immigration is now framed as a national security issue, with migrants viewed as potential threats to the peace and stability of entire nations. And here's the unsettling part: the fear doesn't need to be fully justified by data to take root. Perception is reality. Even though many studies show that crime rates among immigrants are often no higher than those among native citizens, the fear of the unknown and the spread of sensationalized stories have created a climate of suspicion and fear. In cities like Cologne and Paris, isolated incidents of violence involving immigrants have been magnified to suggest a broader pattern, leading to an outcry for stricter border controls and harsher penalties. But is this connection between immigration and crime real, or are populist leaders using fear as a tool to consolidate power? The truth is complicated. While some migrants have committed crimes, the vast majority come seeking safety and a better life. Yet, in a climate where every crime committed by an immigrant makes headlines, public opinion is swayed. This raises a deeper question: are we sacrificing our humanity for a sense of security that might be more illusion than reality? As Europe builds its walls, many wonder if the real threat is immigration, or the erosion of the very values that once made these nations bastions of freedom and hope. Could the US be next? As Europe tightens its borders and adopts more hardline immigration policies, many are wondering, could the United States be next? The signs are there. With record numbers of migrants arriving at the southern border, the US is facing challenges eerily similar to those that have triggered Europe's backlash. But here's the alarming part: this isn't just a border crisis. It's a crisis of identity, security, and economics, and it's igniting a political firestorm. Over the past decade, America has seen a growing divide on how to handle immigration. On one side, there's the argument for building a wall, literally and figuratively. Advocates of stricter immigration controls warn that the country's resources are being stretched to the limit, that wages are being undercut, and that cultural cohesion is at risk. Just like in Europe, populist rhetoric is gaining ground, fueled by concerns that too much immigration, too fast, is threatening the American way of life. But here's the real question: is the US heading toward the same restrictive policies, or will it take a different path? Under the Trump administration, we saw unprecedented efforts to curtail both legal and illegal immigration, with policies that sparked international controversy. While the Biden administration has softened some of those measures, the debate is far from over. With economic challenges mounting, including inflation and job market concerns, many Americans are starting to wonder, are we next? Will we see the rise of a new, harsher immigration stance as the country grapples with its own internal pressures? And what happens if the political pendulum swings back toward more extreme measures? As Europe builds walls, both physical and political, the US might not be far behind. The question isn't just about numbers at the border, it's about the future of what America stands for. Could we soon see the land of immigrants closing its doors? The answer may come sooner than we think. The political climate in the US: a growing divide, The political climate surrounding immigration in the US is growing more divisive by the day, and it's not just a policy debate, it's a battle for the soul of the nation. On one side, there's the call for compassion, for keeping America's doors open to those seeking refuge and opportunity. But on the other side, a louder, more alarming voice is growing, demanding stricter controls and even the closure of borders. It's a divide that mirrors what we're seeing in Europe, where populist leaders have gained momentum by tapping into fears of economic strain, cultural erosion, and security risks. In the US, we see the same narratives at play. Conservative politicians argue that unchecked immigration is eroding American values, weakening national security, and overburdening public resources. They point to rising crime rates, unemployment concerns, and the overwhelming pressure on social services as evidence that the current system is failing. The message? The American dream is under siege. On the flip side, progressives push back, framing immigration as the lifeblood of a nation built by immigrants, and they argue that the economic benefits far outweigh the perceived threats. But here's the question that's shaking the foundation of American politics: who's right? As the debate intensifies, the country feels increasingly polarized. The immigration issue has become a political weapon, used to stoke fears and rally voters. It's not just about policy anymore, it's about identity, belonging, and the future of America. And with the elections and presidential campaigns hinging on this issue, the stakes have never been higher. Will the US follow Europe's lead, turning inward and adopting more extreme measures? Or will it reaffirm its identity as a nation of immigrants? As both sides of the political spectrum dig in their heels, one thing is certain: the immigration debate will be a defining issue for the US in the coming years, and the answer could shape the country for generations to come. So, what's the takeaway here? Europe is closing its doors, and the US may be next. The question is this the right move for these nations, or are they heading down a dangerous path? What will this mean for the future of immigration, human rights, and global relations? We want to hear from you. What do you think? Could America be next to say, "Enough is enough," to immigrants? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this video eye-opening, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into global issues. Turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.